Hello, my name is Walker, and today I'll be showing you the basics of Cura Slicer. When you first open up the program, you'll have your work area. You can select up here to add a printer. If you have one that runs over a network connection, you can select it from network connections. If you don't, you can find it in the non-networked printer section. Once you select your printer, click Add, and it'll add your printer. And up here, you'll select which printers you have. I am using the TiVo Tornado. This menu to the right will probably not be opened up for you. So if you click here, it'll open the menu and you'll have these settings. It'll probably look much more simple than this, but this is under the expert setting, which you can find in this 3 drop-down menu. You can select from basic, advanced, or expert. Or, if you add your own settings, you can go with custom selection. Now I imported my model into Cura by going File, Open Files, and then finding my STL file. Once you have your STL file open, you can select the model, select Move, Scale, Rotate, or Mirror. And this will give you all kinds of options to change how big, small, or where you want it to print at. After you get your model adjusted, you can move over to the settings. The layer height will be how detailed your print will be. So if it has a higher layer height, it'll be less detailed, but it will take much less time to print. If it has a lower layer height, such as 0.1 millimeters, it'll take much more time. So if we slice the coaster in 0.3 millimeter layer height, it'll come out to be 5 hours and 56 minutes long. But if we slice it in 1/10 of a millimeter layer height, it comes out to be 17 hours. But the model itself, when you print it, will be much more high quality. For this representation, I'll be using 0.3 millimeter layer height. Another important setting is infill density. You want this to generally be below 50% unless the model that you are printing is very thin, and then you can make it maybe 70, 80, 90, or even 100% to be fully thick and strong. For material, you want your printing temperature to be between 200 degrees Celsius and 220 degrees Celsius. Test with your printer and see what works. For build plate temperature, you want this to be from 65 to 80 degrees Celsius. Just test around and see what works and get your print to stick. If you're really in a hurry to get a print done, you can turn your print speed up. I don't generally recommend going above 60 millimeters per second, but you can make the infill speed much higher than 60 millimeters per second. You can make it 100 or even 120. Another thing you have to take into consideration is if your model is going to take supports. Here, my coaster does not require any supports, but if I get a model that does require supports, when I do get a model that does require supports, your support area will be highlighted by these red lines that are all over the model. That's where the supports will be built from and connected to. If you choose to generate support and your model needs supports, you can click Generate Support option. Now from here, you can decide whether you want the support to be only from the build plate up so that you don't have supports coming off of your model and leaving little spots all over it, or you can have it to where it only touches supports only build from the build plate. So if, like right here, part of this visor, if it only built up from the build plate, it would mostly only get the inside of the helmet. But if it was building from everywhere, then along the rim, it would build supports upwards, but it would leave little patches along the model. For supports, I recommend going into the settings cog and typing in tree supports, and then enabling the first option for tree support. Once you have that enabled, you can scroll down to experimental, click the drop-down menu, and then check tree support. You'll see once I slice the model, after my model slices, I can click Preview and view where the supports are placed and what my model will look like on the bed sheet. It might be kind of hard to see, but you can close the settings and you can go down by layers to view each individual layer of your print. So you can see the opaque outline of the helmet and the visor. And then you can see that's the third layer. And then we can go all the way down layer by layer, all the way up. And as you go up, you'll see these supports start branching up. And that's why it's called tree, because it generates these interesting supports that generally help the build stay up. The final setting we'll be going over is build plate adhesion. I opened a simpler model so it'd be easier to demonstrate build plate adhesion type. When you choose skirt, it'll put a small outline around your print just to make sure that your filament is extruding properly. When you choose brim, it'll almost spread out the first layer just so it gets good adhesion to the build plate. Raft is basically like putting a brim, except it's its own model underneath of whatever you're printing. So you can see here that the skeleton head is essentially on top of this raft underneath of it, and then it'll build off the raft just so it can stay nice and good to the bed plate. And there we go, that was my beginner's guide to Cura Slicer.